Hi everyone, thanks for joining today. A bit of a small, intimate crowd, but effectively we have muted everyone to start. It is a small little crowd though, so we're a big fan of everyone coming off mute and having questions and those types of things. But if you do have any questions as we go through, just drop them in the chat section, and then again we can come off mute and go through a bit of a dialogue. So today, obviously, the event is around how to find the needle in the haystack, or a needle in a set of needles, is another terminology I've used recently, and around how to find that information, secure it, manage it, and obviously manage that sensitive information. So this afternoon, we're just going to go through a little bit of a welcome and introduction, explain who we are, and go through that in a little bit more detail. Go through some of the common problems that we've seen organisations face probably over the last couple of years, but more so in 2020. Going to go through a bit of a live ControlPoint demonstration. So for those that haven't seen it, again, we can actually get hands-on and you can ask questions and we can go through that. Then we're going to focus predominantly on all the use cases. So we've been doing some ControlPoint work for a while now, and we've got lots of good use cases from clients, including in New Zealand. And again, just something to walk through there, and really that live Q&A at the end. So again, small little intimate session. Put your hand up, add a comment in the session. We'll go off mute. We'll have a bit of a dialogue as we go through. So starting off myself, today I'm Carl, I'm the General Manager for WyldLynx. I've suppose been working in the IM&G industry for a while. We've also got Sarah on the line as well. She'll take over some of the use cases and things later. She's our principal information specialist, but she's also the ControlPoint guru and the one who does all the projects with the wider team for us internally. So a little bit about who WyldLynx is, because if you haven't heard about us or we haven't had discussions or anything to date, it might be a bit of I suppose left field. Been around since 2009. We're a Micro Focus partner, obviously based in Australia, in Queensland. However, we also do not just Content Manager, we do the whole SCM suite. So things like ControlPoint, Structured Data Manager, build a lot of innovations on top of it, do a lot of migrations and those types of things around CM as well. As you can see, also we're a Microsoft partner, so we do, I suppose, align towards Microsoft and using some of their cloud technologies. That could just be for hosting, that could be doing some smart bolt-ons and things that we have in that space. And we're also a DocuSign partner because it was about 12 months ago we realised, I suppose, digital signatures and those and what that was going to be and where it was going to go is why we moved into DocuSign as well as being a partner. This is effectively where we work. So just because we are based in Queensland doesn't mean we don't work across Australia and New Zealand, even some UK clients as of late. So again, we do work across the wider spectrum. As I mentioned before, we do focus obviously across the whole suite. So we provide that holistic information management and information governance sort of thing. We don't actually just do Content Manager and the upgrades and those types of things. We definitely do that. It is, I suppose, our bread and butter. But we also, again, do things from migrations. That could be a trim to trim migration or a CM to CM migration. We also focus on the unstructured data, but also the structured data. So we look at that from a holistic perspective across the board. This is kind of where we see ourselves. For anyone at home, this kind of reminds me of the Marvel Iron Man series, but effectively where we see ourselves sort of sit in the middle and I suppose advise clients. So being an expert in Micro Focus, obviously the Microsoft and Azure technologies, but also the Office technologies, and just, again, I suppose getting the best value out of all three of those. This is a concept, content services, been around. Gartner, I think, coined it a few years ago, and our slide hasn't changed really since that happened. But this is kind of how we see, I suppose, the world in that holistic space. So where there might be, again, content manager sitting here, and there might be users who use it actively every day, and that's great. If you've got an organization that people love using content manager, we're already winning. But there are, I suppose, other aspects to use it, and we've been pitching this for a while about this governance and privacy platform, and around having things like integrations from custom interfaces, which we have a few of those examples, or having interfaces to do search or line of business systems integrating to Content Manager, and again, storing documents in that Content Manager system, but just, again, letting people work from where they want to work. Same with the Microsoft ecosystem. We do a lot of the SharePoint out-of-the-box integrations or bolt-ons around that. So again, Teams, especially in COVID times, is a new hot thing, and in my opinion, it's just another sprawl and another thing to manage, similar to the Sharepoint days. But again, if users like to use Teams and behind the scenes there's governance and that's happening, then perfect. Let them work in the space that they want to work in. Also around the social media integrations, so we partner with another client, another organization around that to provide some governance into Content Manager for that. So again, that could be things from WeChat to Facebook to LinkedIn, you name it. There's lots of different channels and connectors in that space. And obviously to the ControlPoint or the around unstructured data, but also SDM around the structured data. So it's kind of I suppose, our view of the world that we always, I suppose, talk to clients and go on a bit of a journey with them around that. So some of the enterprise challenges today. This is again, I suppose, what we've seen recently across our clientele, and these shouldn't be new for everyone in the virtual room today. But the data growth out of control, I think it's gotten worse since COVID and using Teams and Slack and those types of things. But data is growing at a rapid rate. 80–90% of that is unstructured. The share drive, SharePoints, Teams of the world, those types of things, again, continues to keep growing. What we often find, and especially using ControlPoint projects, and you'll start to see this when we go through a bit of a live demo shortly, is often information is created but then never really reused, or it gets created and then recreated because I can't find it. And we find that most organizations are tending to ignore the unstructured information and or structured, definitely, but more so it's a shared drive, it's a network drive, it's too hard, it's out of sight, out of mind. And when we do ControlPoint projects, and this is just a little fact down the bottom, is we actually relate, I suppose, the cost of storage based on industry papers to actually, I suppose, show executives and show powers to be that that information, be it unstructured, has a cost to manage, to store, for users to search, all those types of things, which helps with a bit of an ROI with doing these types of projects. Backup is taking longer. Amount of times that I've personally seen this where, again, more and more data, backup takes longer. There's the recovery point objectives or the time objectives are continually harder to achieve. The amount of times we've had conversations with clients around, they'll replace the backup software before addressing the problem. I have a bit of a saying that it's kind of that you'll keep mopping at the bottom of the hill instead of going to the top of the hill and turning the tap off. And again, often this continues to happen, but no one really wants to talk about the disposal of that information, where it is, or even what's in the backups. And more recently, with a bit of a privacy and risk perspective, is around what sensitive data is held in those backups and where are they stored. Migration to the cloud or Microsoft 365. Not sure most organizations should be on a journey or have been, and they're all at different paces. But we often talk to clients about a lift and shift. So the approach and the common approach from the Microsoft or the IT teams of the world is around, just lifting and shifting your data, taking it from where it is and then moving it to the cloud effectively. Those collaboration tools like SharePoint and Teams, again, obviously start to push more data into the cloud in that space. The storage is cheap. I always love that model in the cloud. It's always cheaper. So let's just move our whole network drive up there. And when moving, data to the cloud effectively, and let's say from a network drive, is what data are you moving? Often it's we've moved 10 terabytes, 100 terabytes. It's just our network drive data. But, what's actually in it? And then also, do we need to move it all? We've had a couple of examples here. And these are all come from ControlPoint or Discovery or network drive type file analytics projects. But one is where we found on network drives a whole series of Nashville. So it's a TV series for those that didn't know. Different client, similar concept, Game of Thrones. Again, found a whole series of data sitting on that. And again, while, I suppose sharing that information, whether at work or outside of work is probably an okay thing, on a corporate network where you've got that and you're backing that data up, but also opening that organization to liability probably isn't the greatest option. We also had a client who found cat videos. Now, I thought cat videos were only for YouTube, but apparently this IT organization in IT, someone in IT had downloaded cat videos locally, and a lot of them, to the network drive and had those cat videos sitting literally on that network drive. And it was only in training when Sarah and I did some training that we said, we'll Google cat just to see what comes up. And next minute we found all these videos throughout the network drive. And the last example we had was a recent client who's moved their whole network drive into Azure, because again, go back to that cloud is cheap model. And the organization didn't really care. So they moved about 100 terabytes of data from on-prem into the cloud. At the time, the network drive on-premise didn't really get too much love. You know, the lights were on, the system was going, everybody was happy. But what effectively happened is once they moved it to the cloud and the discount periods from Microsoft and co started to expire, they ended up getting the true cost of having 100 terabytes in the cloud on premium storage in Azure. And it wasn't cheap, and the executives now understand that that's something we want to fix, and things like duplication and what we've moved and do we need it all are now back in their, I suppose, radar or back in the microscope or under the microscope for that, just because of that cost. Again, that cost was there. It was a different cost. Now it's a new cost, and it's more highlighted. It's back on the radar again. Finding sensitive information is often impossible, so that inability to find everything about a certain person, so Carl, my address, where I live, my date of birth, my driver's license, those types of things. It's becoming, I suppose, incredibly difficult to find things like credit card or credit cards or certain patterns of information, and a concept of PCI DSS compliance around, you know, being able to, we don't store credit cards and those types of things. We actually had an example here where Sarah and I, again, were doing some training, and we challenged a client to say we'll find them a credit card on their network drive as part of a ControlPoint project, and there might have been a wager for a dinner or a possible drink of, I'll say, soft drink later on. And as part of that project, we found that day we found a credit card. Found multiple, but we found one that was important. That one credit card was the CEO's credit card on a travel form in an open and accessible space on the network drive. So anyone could literally go and find it, see it, and use that credit card hypothetically. And again, there were guidelines, so that, you know, there might be guidelines, users will be users, one of my favorite sayings, to say don't do these certain things, but they tend to do that anyway, and that was that prime example. And one of my other favorite sayings is around you don't know what you don't know. We had an example recently where a client it was a health client, so they started to store sensitive or patient information as well as the credit cards in Microsoft Teams. They ended up sharing that externally with university students for a project that they were working on. And effectively, when questioned, it was IT gave me access. I thought I could do that. So again, there lots of things along that Microsoft Teams journey that could have been enabled or set up so that was, you know, no issues in that example. But again, quick search of the Sharepoint site found that very quickly. Also got some trends around eDiscovery and information searches. So again, that inability to find PII, the credit card stuff, again, similar sort of vein, going from sensitive to more information searches. But information searches to us is very similar to, in New Zealand, it's the OIRs, so the official information request. In Australia, we've got 7 different types of those with all different acronyms, but effectively an information search is how we sort of coin it. Again, that could be a legal search, a Hail Mary search. It's that time to go and find content about a certain topic or person. We find when using ControlPoint and when we talk to clients is they often do those types of searches manually. So they get the business area in you know, the council or the organisation is to go and find that information, and they'll say, you know, Sarah, can you go and find all the information that you can about topic A, job B, project Y, or Carl, and they often go and do that manually. So it's that ability to actually, again, and they look at the metadata level, they don't look in content, and you kind of need to have been there long enough, if it's old historic information, to know that you know, where we stored stuff about Carl or Project X or those types of things. There's also a raft of different, I suppose, studies or industry papers around the time it takes for users in organisations to search for their information. The example we have here is there's 2 hours per day that people search for information, and something to think about from your own organisations, and just reflecting on how often do you search for stuff, and do you often find it, or do you often not find it in your organisation. Data breaches. This has been, I suppose, a newer topic of late, especially in the last sort of 12, 24 months. It's been around for a while, but as we move more things to the cloud and become more aggressive in that, it's definitely happening more so. They're happening every month. I did a presentation last week around this, and just in Australia, I think there was about 6 different use cases in the last 30 days. And these were quite large, discovered credit cards, discovered driver's licenses, discovered and breached my personal data. The list went on. And most organisations have maybe the right software or some procedures in place, but often don't know what's actually happened or what's been breached. In the presentation that we did last week, it was around there was a certain percentage of users that didn't know a data breach had happened, or organisations had happened within 30 days. And this was at about 500 different organisations, and 47 of those didn't actually know it had happened within 2 months. So they had a data breach, they didn't know where it was for 2 months, and most of them were sitting in the 1 month bucket. And I suppose the use case or the example that we often we talk to mainly more IT people around this use case is around if your organisation had your network drive breached, most organisations would know the where. So we lost the G drive and we lost the corporate services section. And we would know that the corporate services section has a volume of 10 terabytes and 1 million files, but often we don't know what we've actually lost. So I suppose the things we often ask is around, well, in that information, out of those 1 million files, did you happen to lose or have data breach for 24 different credit cards? Did they get compromised? Should you go and contact Carl, the citizen whose data that you kept? That you should go and change your credit card before the flow and effect of a data breach effectively hurts at the other end post the incident. There's also a raft of privacy and GDPR drivers. So this is predominantly more so overseas that we're seeing, especially around the GDPR, but that right to be forgotten and that right to find everything about a person and get rid of it. Not too sure, and again, a question I'd love to ask at the end here is around how this is happening in the NZ space. But I know recently we had a council last month they lost a lawsuit and a legal battle, and they had to actually remove the data for a user and prove that they've done that from all systems across council. So it wasn't just what was in the EDRMS, it was across every system, the structured, the unstructured, the EDRMS itself, property systems, finance systems, and say legally hand on heart, this is what we've disposed of Carl Duncan. And that was actually an Australian citizen, so there was no GDPR or any other sort of European or overseas rules in place. It was just a lawsuit with effectively that citizen itself. There's a couple of drivers, legislative drivers. We obviously have, again, things like we all do, Privacy Acts, Record Acts. There's one out of ACT in Canberra at the moment around, I suppose, the National Archives and that robust information management. Again, there might be some sitting within NZ at the moment around the similar sort of approach. So ControlPoint. So for those that haven't seen it, again, I'm not a big fan of these Gartners or Foresters, but they're there for those that love them. But effectively, the solution itself does sit in a relevantly high space within Gartner. So it sits in the middle quadrant here in that space, and the same with Forrester, sitting as one of the leaders in that space as well. And again, this is for the unstructured file analytics tool. Again, there's lots of variances of how all this works with these sort of providers, but effectively that's where it sits. So ControlPoint, effectively, what does it do? If you haven't seen it, we're going to go through it today, and we're going to go through a bit of a live demo, and again, we can ask some questions and go forth on that. But effectively, ControlPoint works in a number of different phases. So you have to scan and analyse your content, and ROT, we'll talk about ROT a fair bit, and ROT is redundant, obsolete and trivial data. We'll talk more about that shortly. Once you've scanned your content, effectively you then spend some time filtering, indexing, going through, and actually looking at your data in a different way. You then start to, I suppose, organise and automate that type of information, and then you've got that ability to effectively now look at whether you want to dispose it, whether you want to act, you want to archive it, you want to declare it, you want to manage it in place. Again, it's an end-to-end tool, and often when we compare these tools to different tools in the market, and clients tell us, hey, I've heard one of the, tool X does this. This is the only tool that we've seen that goes end to end from analysing all the way through to acting. And again, lots of tools have come up in the journey that we've had. So ControlPoint, obviously, again, allows you to discover information in a new way, reduce duplication, transform or transition to the cloud, manage Microsoft 365 content, discover that sensitive information, automate those information searches, and out of the box has a number of different connectors. So connectors are just data or repositories that it scans to. And out of the box, we've got a file system, so just a standard network drive. We have an edge file system, which actually allows you to archive data between effectively going from one tier of storage to another tier. You've also got Sharepoint, so the different ranges, whether it be on-premise or in the cloud. Exchange, same answer again, on-premise or in the cloud. Content Manager, XML, and Hadoop. There's also a raft of other additional connectors. So they're all the out-of-the-box ones, and then there's a raft of additional ones here that are also available for I suppose, consumption and purchase afterwards. Again, additional costs for each one of these, but it could be Google Drive, it could be OneDrive for business, it could be other EDRMSs that you've used, like FileNet back in the day. Enterprise Vault is a common one we see as well across clients. So ControlPoint has the ability to find patterns, and again, we'll go through this in the demo, but just to give some pre-context, but effectively, there's a raft, there's about 100 odd patterns in the system automatically. So again, addresses, banking numbers, credit cards, they're already pre-configured patterns that are in the product and in the tool. So credit cards, as an example, has all the different credit card patterns. So in Australia, we've got a 16-digit credit card pattern for most bank providers. So that will be a 4-digit with, or 16-digit with slashes, spaces, or dashes, depending on how it's put into unstructured data. And it's also got all the other patterns for all the other countries as well. You've also got that ability to add your own patterns. Now, most organizations and clients we go through with this have certain, project numbers or patterns or employee numbers or work orders or patterns that mean something to you that won't mean something to the organization next to you. So again, you can create your own patterns, and this is about finding, hypothetically, that an employee document might be of more value than, Carl's daughter's tuck shop list or lunch. Those types of things, and whatever I've stored on that network drive. So again, allows you to find those patterns. So patterns can be found in most organizational documents. If you didn't know that, they definitely do exist. This is an example. I actually used to work at a council. Full disclosure, this is a publicly available document as well. And it's an example that I effectively have used because it resonates, especially for me, but also for like councils or different organizations. But this is actually effectively a document. It's a development assessment document, and it's got different sets of data, and we'll go through what that looks like. So the green highlights effectively are the personal identifiable information. So the things like the names, the details, the addresses, the positions, the street addresses, anything that's personally identifiable for that. We've also got that ability to find those things like credit cards. So again, within that document, finding credit cards patterns within that. If we go back to this one, again, some of this other information, so this red highlight effectively is an organizational pattern. It's specific to this organization around development applications. And all the ones that have the orange or the yellow highlight is information around, that it's probably relevant, or you might want to search for things and sort of add different filters or slice and dice that. But that ability to see, when the Sunshine Coast planning scheme was, or you want to see that it was a material change of use document, or it was in relation to a dual occupancy. So piecing all these little bits of information together can give you that sort of holistic feel. Categories within ControlPoint. So a category allows you to effectively find different types of information, and we'll go through this again in the demonstration. And again, you can do a fair bit with categories. This is just an example of looking for the words development and Unity Water, and bringing back all of the information that has those two exact words in it, or multiple words. And we'll go through some use cases we've done for clients on this later. In this example, you can also give ControlPoint documents. So in this example here, we're actually giving ControlPoint 50 documents to learn from. And again, this is the ability to say, I'm looking for this type of document. It's a contract, and I want you to go and find all its brothers and sisters wherever it sits within the organization. So you can actually give ControlPoint that document. It will learn the content of it, the structure, and do a little bit of machine learning, and then go, right, now I'm going to go find similar documents that have the same content and the same structure that they're made up of. So, full demonstration. So here we have ControlPoint. So again, we talked about it's made up of 3 different things. So we've got repositories, which is the information of where you're searching. So what is the repository? Is it a shared drive? Is it a network drive? Is it a content manager? Is it Exchange? Wherever you're looking, Sharepoint. Categories are effectively what you're looking for, certain types of information. So again, that ability to search for metadata either in the document, around the document, or specific patterns, but also that ability to give ControlPoint the actual documents and effectively learn from that and continue to find it. And then policies is that doing. So I found some information, I found a contract, and I found it in a shared drive repository. Now I want to move that into Content Manager, as an example, into the contracts register. So again, the policies is the doing part of it. It could also be that I've found a duplication sitting on network drive and I'd like to have a policy to actually dispose of it. Again, they're the 3 sort of concepts that make up ControlPoint. So repositories, this is an example. They go through 3 different stages or phases. Registered, when they're just effectively first looked at. Analyze is when you've put a bit of an analysis across your information. And again, this allows you to look at the information with different lenses. So you might have a different analysis set that starts off with, we're going to manage everything the same way. But then you might say, the development services area, they have lots of permanent or long-term retention information. So the lens of the analysis we want to put across that might be different. So again, you can change that and tweak that per repository. And then manage state, this is the nirvana state that I like to call, the ability to actually automatically do stuff. So we'll talk more about this later, but if you were automatically finding contracts in repositories, so a contract gets put in a shared drive, it's there for a certain point in time. When you move a repository to a managed state, it actually allows you to go, I've already found this, it's a it's a contract, and automatically do actions into Content Manager, or wherever you wanted to do it. So again, it's that ability to auto classify, that ability to auto have rules and run in the background without you doing anything. These are all different repositories, so they all have different symbols. So again, Content Manager, we've got Exchange, we've also got some SharePoints here, some file systems. Again, they're all slightly different. And you can also create groups, so you can roll these up. And we're looking at a group in this example, but you can actually roll all these up. So you might create your network drives broken down by structures or by org units or business units, and then you can roll it up and have a holistic view of what's the whole organization going to look like. So in this example, this is an org repository, so everything that we have. We can see at a very high level we have some tabs across the top, so summary, duplicates, analysis, tags, contents, visualization, and subsets. We'll go through those shortly. We can see how many items are sitting within this. So this is just a demo system we have. So it's 15,000 items and it equates to 4.5 gig of data. In use cases, shortly, we have a lot more than that. It comes up with this visual indication of ROP, so that redundant, obsolete, and trivial. So redundant are pure duplications. So this means that within this repository or group, wherever we're looking, we have duplicated data and multiple copies of that. It could be 1, it could be 10. Again, we don't know until we go through and have a bit of a look. It's also got obsolete, so out of the box, and again, these are configurable. So again, you can change this as you go, but it says that anything older than 5 years that hasn't been modified or viewed may be obsolete. So it may have less value. It's not to say it hasn't met its retention period if it's a long-term record or a permanent record. So it still may need to be kept, but it's saying that if it hasn't been accessed in 10 years, well, maybe we should look at what we should do with it. Do we archive that? Do we leave it on the network drive? And again, we'll go through some of those examples. And trivial, unfortunately for the IT people in the virtual room, things like shortcuts, IT files, again, sort of make up trivial by default. And again, configurable, but you'd be surprised how many just thumbnail shortcut files add up to a lot of volume across an enterprise. It's a very quick win and reduces your storage very quickly, and they get auto-generated again every time you click on a thumbnail, but just reducing that quickly is a small quick win. You'll also get to see potential risk items. So as ControlPoint scanning, it can either scan at the metadata level, so effectively the name and what it is sitting Windows Explorer as an example. It could then search within effectively the metadata level within the document, so the repository metadata, but also when you open up, say, like Word, and you've got properties within that, you can scan that. And then lastly, content. Now, content gives you a lot more richer functionality, but it does have a little bit more storage. But to be honest, 99% of our clients do content because of what you can do with it. And when it's scanning this, again, there might be unsupported file type. There might be types in your organization that the ControlPoint doesn't understand. It has over 1,000 different file types that we'll go through shortly, but it might not understand some. The ones we often see is password protected. And this is where you might have a policy in your organization to say we don't password protect Excel files. It's a common one that we always see. But again, users will be users, and we can actually see password protected documents. So again, we've had a couple of clients that have found those, gone back to the users, and one person had left and to find what the password was because they put a password on corporate information. The growth rate and the disk space. So this actually allows you to see the rate of which your drive or whatever you scanned, repository, we'll say network drive, has grown over a period of time, and then the additional disk space that's taken up. So again, this is a good sort of, I suppose, tool. We've seen this, as initiatives have happened internally in organizations, people can go, well, hang on, in 2015, we introduced an EDRMS, so we started using that instead of network drives. So the content might go really high up and then start to patter off a little bit, but then it might spike again. So it's a visual way of being able to understand, when you've done something, what was the effect, that cause and effect, and see what it is. You've also got all the different file types. So again, out of the box, ControlPoint drops these into different file types or different buckets. So if you just want to look at documents or emails or maps or things that we often find, again, quick wins, those audio files or video files or archive files are often, large zip files or Game of Thrones, those type of examples. Again, you can just look at your repository in different ways. You also have the ability to create any more of these that you'd like. So again, this is the out of the box, but you can change that, tweak it. And we've had if it doesn't know what it is, it puts it in the other category. And then again, you could create your own relevant example. We've had one client who created OneNote. They wanted to see all the OneNote files, and that was what they effectively wanted to see. So again, they backed them up by mistake on-prem instead of in the cloud, and they just wanted to see all the OneNote files so they could get rid of them. Again, lots of different use cases that clients will have. Down the bottom here, you have of interest, and we have potentially sensitive items. So again, if we have categories set up, and we'll talk more about this when we get to categories, but we have that ability to see, when I'm searching for this network drive, or I'm searching through Sharepoint or Teams or whatever it may be, I can see that there's some job descriptions. I can see we've got some contracts. I can see we've got some finance statements. So if you've predefined what these categories are, and these are probably the high risk, high valuable information in our land, when it's scanning, it will go, hey, I've got a flag, and I've flagged we've got some employee files or job descriptions. So again, you don't have to look through all the data. It will, if you predefine some of these and what's important to you, again, it will start to flag and show you some of those. That sensitive items, these are all the patterns within the document. So again, this allows you to see that we have things like medical conditions, addresses, phone numbers, banks, credit card numbers, passport numbers, all those types of things. And again, there's a raft of these. They all might not be relevant for you, but again, you can create your own as well. And again, it will just flag that I've got credit cards, and it might be sensitive, or it might be personal information. So I maybe should look at that before looking at anything else. So going through duplicates, when we look at duplicates, there's two different ways to look at it. There's a duplicate set and a duplicate by location. So a duplicate set effectively shows me that I've got a number of duplicates in this repository. Now, again, it could be one repository on one shared drive. It could be the whole shared drive. So as you roll things up, these often get bigger. And I can see very quickly here, I've got two of these documents. And again, I can interact with these documents. I can see little bits of information about it. I can see where it's stored on the network drive. I can see when it was last updated, created, if there's authors, if it's got any, it's got some medical examples in it with some conditions and some drugs. But again, it allows you to actually see that. I can also see here that, again, I've got a similar document. And again, this is doing an MD5 checksum on a document. So there's a 99.99% accuracy with this being a duplicate. Now, we have had some customers challenge that. And look, I was a customer once and I did. So when I first got ControlPoint, I threw it into an online tool and put two duplicates together. The ControlPoint said it was a duplicate and I didn't trust it. And I tested 3 different tools online and they all said it's exactly the same thing. So it's an industry standard when it's doing that duplication analysis. And again, in this example, we can see that there's another folder. So again, this document is living in 2 different spaces, and again is a duplicate. So we could look at different examples of zip files that are quite large. It could be another PDF. They could be named completely differently. As we go through again, we can look at those duplicates. Now within each one of these duplicates, we can actually do some actions. So we've got a little actions menu here, and we can actually view this document. So if I've got access to this on the network drive, or the account doing the scanning has it, I can actually view the document. I can download it. I can see the properties, which is the quick example we saw before. I can see if anyone's got any policies or tags on it. We'll go through what this looks like shortly. I can also see any of the advanced properties. So if I've scanned content, I have to select an item. If I've scanned content, it will start to match all of the content to certain properties within ControlPoint. So these are all the different things that it's picked up. Now again, some of this is a bit of a gobbledygook, but it's picked up all of the security groups that are applying at the network share level. We can see exactly the path for that document. We can see the MD5 checksum value, and we've picked up all these fields in idle to say that it's got a credit card or it doesn't, or different values that we've been looking for as patterns. So again, a raft of different information that you can look at. We can also take some other actions around exporting the document, or this view if we needed to. So if we found some duplicates, we can export it. We can also train a new category, which we can talk about later. The main thing you can do is around tagging information. So out of the box, ControlPoint's got 4 tags: preserve, protect, remove, and review. You can create your own tags. You can do what you want after this, but these are the 4 that are baked into the product. And effectively, if you wanted to say you wanted to remove this document, you then have to provide a reason. So I could say, well, it's obsolete because it's a duplicate. The other one is the one that I want to keep, and I don't want this one. I could choose to add a comment. I don't have to, but I could, and then I can apply a tag. So what that's actually going to do is tag the information. It's gone off to the database. We'll come back shortly and have a little tag against it. We'll talk more about tags afterwards. But effectively, this allows you to actually, I suppose, categorize your information of what you or users want to do with it. So you might start working with different business areas and tell them to, you tell me what you want to remove, Sarah, from corporate services or from finance. Tell me what you want to keep. When you say preserve, that means we're moving it to Content Manager. When you say protect, it means it's sensitive. We've got to do something quickly. If you say remove, we're going to delete it because that's what you've told us to do. And then you've got review is, I'm not too sure, I want to look at it. Again, each one of these has different, effective names and reasons, and you can go through and look at that as well. You can see here that the tags now come back, and we can actually see that tag's been applied. If we go back and have a look in the properties, this is where you can get to the defensible disposition space. You can actually see that this tag's been created by me as the admin in the system, but that would have someone's real name in a real life. And again, allows you to actually say, Carl has said this is okay to dispose. It's often we find when we do these types of projects is when you've ever had to do any sort of disposal out of Content Manager or any EDMS, you've got to kind of give blood. You've got to go through 1,000 different hoops. On network drive, people can hit delete, no one cares. When we implement something like this, very quickly it goes, oh, hang on, we need 75 different approvals to get this one document that is on a network drive to be deleted. And it's that balance of saying that the users can do it now and trying to work to that. We are capturing, if we engage users, they're telling us to do it. That's better than us hitting delete. And it's that defensible disposition. Duplicates by location. So this actually allows you to look by locations. So internal is the repository itself. So there's 6,000 duplicates in that repository itself. And then we have what we call master repositories or master locations. So this is a Content Manager in our example. So again, a quick sort of analysis you could say is, well, if it's in my EDRMS, whatever that EDRMS may be, right now I can say, well, we're already corporately managing it. Why are we having a copy of it sitting somewhere else? So this is often one of the quick wins that clients go through and just go through and go, well, we don't need it sitting on a network drive, replace it with a TR5 for the Content Manager people, rather than have 20 different copies of that document sitting across the enterprise. In relation to analysis, there's a raft of different things that you can look at from an analysis. We'll go through a couple of them. But looking at created, so looking at the created date, so this is when documents were created in that repository. So we can see that there was 6,900 documents that were created 10 years and over. And again, as we sort of change the view, we can also look at when it was accessed or modified. Now, each one of these obviously changes how you look at information. So last accessed, again, there's been more that's been skewed to 5 years and over. And last modified will be probably very similar in, again, a lot more sitting towards this tail end. Now, again, allows you to have a look at that information, go, well, we might have created it 10 years ago, but we access it every day. So it's of value to us versus we created 10 years ago, we haven't accessed it or modified it in 9 years. In theory, it has less value to us. Again, still got to put retention and disposal around that. You can also look by size. So this is often a good little example that clients go through and look at, well, I'm really looking at the 5 gig, 1 to 5 gig range. And this is where we found a lot of Game of Thrones for clients. But in this example, I just want to look at files that are 10 meg to 100 meg because these are often PST files, movie files, audio files, large PDFs or large documents. And I want to know what they are. So again, all super high res photos. So again, I can just look at that information by the size, and again, same sort of thing, act upon this as I need to. I've also got the ability to add a policy. We'll talk more about what these are shortly, but if I wanted to move this file into Content Manager, I could actually, again, go and pick any of these policies, or if I wanted to dispose of it because I don't want to review that information and I just want to get rid of it, again, I can act directly from this interface and that will go on its way to be disposed. And we'll talk more about that shortly. You also get a tag view. So this tag view is, again, just looking at all the different ones that we individually tagging within this repository, and it brings back all the tags that have been applied. So these are all the remove tags or review tags. Again, when you're working with different business areas, we often find this is a good little view for those that are managing the solution or the product. So you can actually say that, Sarah from Corporate Services has gotten rid of, or tag stuff for me to do. I can now go and remove these because that's what she said I could do, as an example. You can also go down a bit of a content view. So again, in this repository, we're looking at Content Manager, Exchange, Sharepoint file systems as well. But if you wanted to navigate down your file tree, often most people in organizations like to navigate, they're not searchers. So you can actually navigate down into your drive and just look at the contract example as an example. So you've got that ability to navigate down the drive and get to the folder of where documents exist. One of the key things is ControlPoint is document-centric, not folder-centric, so it cares about the documents. It captures that structure, but all the actions and everything you do is based on the documents. And lastly, you've also got the ability to create visualizations. So often, I'd say most clients don't get to this level just straight out of the box, but they do, I suppose, get it as the journey in managing information happens. But this is where you can actually cluster information. So again, we're scanning content. You've got to have scanned content to be able to do this. And based on the tool, it's read the content of the document. It says, hey, all of this information is related at a concept level in the document. So all of this 219 documents is about these 4 things. Or if I look over here, I've got, again, different little clusters of information that mean something because they're all related to SharkKey, whatever SharkKey is. So again, and these are all medical records. So as you go through and you can actually see it, it will cluster that information based on what it's similar to. So it's not a duplicate. It will just show you that these are all medical records and they're all similar to each other, hence why it's come up on a cluster. And you can also go and change your different cluster patterns and do all those types of things as well. But as a quick example, that's it's just visualization. Lastly, you also have the ability to create a subset. So a subset is, you go back to that contents example, you navigate down to a certain point and you want to just visualize that data in a different way. The subset will give you all of everything we just went through, but in a different way at that level. It won't be at the top level. It won't be at corporate services. It will be at the finance folder, Carl's favorite stuff folder, and looking at that holistically. So categories, again, categories is a way about finding that information. So again, if you've got the data in ControlPoint or within documents, again, you can set up this sort of taxonomy or folksonomy or hierarchical structure. And in this example, again, defining what this is really up to you. Again, you can change it and tweak it as you wish. But this is an example that we had before on the slide. And this is where I'm actually finding contracts based on the content. So again, I've uploaded those that category. I've updated all of that information. I've given it ControlPoint something to learn from, and it's gone and learned from it. Actually did this with a client, and she uploaded invoices, and we were again going through training and working through it. And there was a proportion of invoices that ControlPoint didn't pick up, and again the client knew that information was invoices over in that network drive, but it didn't pick it. And what it came down to is we didn't give it a sample size. So again, ControlPoint will know what you've told it, and if you haven't told it about a certain type of invoice sitting in the wings, it won't know that actually exists. So you've got to give it a good sample size when you're doing any sort of training of documents and learning with that. Again, we've got that ability to go and find wherever there's a credit card pattern. So again, showed up before, but if I go through and have a look at this document, I can see that I've actually got a credit card pattern within that document. Again, address information, whatever it may be. We've just looked at categorizing information wherever it sits in the entity. We don't care, but we just want to know that it's looking for credit cards. And if we find a credit card value in this field, then it needs to come up so we can act accordingly. The information searches, again, this is where we, I suppose, see a lot of clients start to do those information searches and legal searches and those types of things, where they will try and find everything about Carl Duncan, as an example. I often use myself in these demos, but so this is finding where Carl Duncan is mentioned directly in the actual either the document or the metadata. So again, we can actually see where this is coming up, and we can actually see where there I am now. I'm sitting in a CC line around a trim upgrade that we did. You can also then combine data together, so we can actually see, Jonathan Doe and date of birth. And if we go and have a bit of a look, again, similar to what we had before, I've got that ability to actually go through and again, select where I want to look. So what repositories am I looking at? Do I actually want to look in Exchange? Probably off one that's not often looked in when doing these types of searches. And I can either give it lots of text or different examples, or I can actually be specific. So similar to Content Manager, I can do very exact Boolean searches and look for data. I can also look at different fields and different things, results, subfolders. Again, there's a raft of things we can do in that space. This is that example we had before. So this is looking at a pattern where MCU/0001 is coming up, and we can see that it's graphed through the document. So it's in a lot of the document titles as well, so it's coming up. That same example, when we, I suppose, flip it, that was obviously very development centric for that organization. If we flip it and look for the entity or the organization who was the developer, and it was about lot 27, because that was the development parcel of land we were looking at, and we know that the parcel of land is on SARS Street, effectively we can see all of the information that's coming up. So we're looking for these to all come up so that we can actually, again, refine this and get the 11 results where all of this is included. Again, the one thing that we've seen across the board, this is a good example, is when I view this document, we might find things in emails. I know when I was in councils and in government, we'd go to court and I wouldn't, we'd be very confident that we had everything we needed, and the next minute the person that we were trying to, I suppose, win against would hand us an email from someone in our organisation, and emails we didn't scan, we didn't look at, and we didn't do anything with. We didn't search for those types of things. And something like this, while this is a bit gimmicky, to approve something, you can give someone a carton of beer. It's the example of finding that information wherever that information sits. It doesn't just have to be in Content Manager or in shared drives. It can be wherever it's sitting in that entity. And again, that ability to go and find different bits of information again. So the difference between looking at for WyldLynx, obviously our business name, looking at 8 different documents, and then adding that to Carl Duncan. We also have the ability, again, this is very structured, creating those searches as we go, but we also have the ability to do a bit of a federated search or an enterprise search here as well. So I can actually start typing in MCU 150001, and as I type, 15/0001. What this is actually going to do, this is a very quick search, and it will search everything you've got access to. So categories is very structured searching, and this pattern has come up on 206 documents. So as long as I've indexed it with ControlPoint, I can go find everything about it very quickly. So again, most organizations start this way, and then refine this or create a category from, I suppose, looking at that big search at the top level. Lastly, we've also got policies. So again, a policy, go back to all those actions and what we want to do. These are just a couple of quick examples, but I might want to archive that content to another network drive because, I don't want it to be on top tier storage. I want to archive it off and then put it on a brick for a later point. I also want to declare it and move it into Content Manager. So I might want to actually go through that, and we'll talk through that one shortly. I used the before, the dispose and get rid of it. So again, I've got that ability to dispose of it. And if ControlPoint's got the access, it will go back and find that document and get rid of it. The ability to put a hold on information. Sarah's got some examples with some clients we've done, and we've used this recently. And again, we could also move those between network drives, again, as we mentioned before. So declaring, this is just a quick little level of, this is going to go into Content Manager. When we declare something to Content Manager, we have the ability to do a couple of things. We can leave a shortcut so that if we move a file from, say, Sarah's corporate services area, she can click a shortcut. It opens up a web link and takes you to Content Manager web client, just to say that the document's been moved and relocated. You could delete the document. I'm a fan of that one, cutting the cord. That's my personal opinion. But actually remove the document as part of a, we're not using network drives or wherever it may be. And lastly, you have the ability to leave the document. It's a bit of an odd use case, but we've done something with automating legal searches for another client, where they copy all the information into a legal area, wherever it's found in the entity, and then they go through and redact and do what they need to do for an information search. So again, that ability to copy that document rather than interrupt the original has that ability as well. So here we can see that we've assigned, so policies go through a number of different phases, but we've assigned 147 and we've executed only 3. And if we go through and have a bit of a look on the policy items, we actually have a review step. Now, you don't need a review step, but this allows, again, depending on how it's rolled out to the organization, that ability to actually review the action before doing it. So we've applied this to all these records. I can go through and actually toggle one and approve it or reject it. So again, allows me to go, well, no, Sarah's applied the wrong policy. I'm going to reject it. And I'm going to now approve one as an example. Now what happens behind the scenes, this will go off to content to that repository, find the document, and then move it into Content Manager. In this example, it's going to leave a shortcut. And as we go through and see, we can actually now start to see it will go through an execution phase, and then it will be a completed phase. So nothing happens instantly. There's an execution phase, and each of these policies have different timings. Some are high priority, some are low priority, so forth and so on. And then as we go through, again, it will go through and be executed into Content Manager from there. Sarah, over to you on some of the use cases.
Thanks, Carl, and thanks to the demo gods for that looking so good for your demo. So just going to talk through a few use cases and a few customers that we work with. This list isn't exhaustive, and neither is our list of use cases, but just some big organizations and some smaller ones, and we'll talk you through how the scenarios can apply across the board. And in my 10 years of government, at all levels of government, I can apply all of these following use cases to historical information searches or information hoarding, I like to call it. So if we just move on, Carl, if that's okay, we'll go through some other customers who also use ControlPoint, customers of Micro Focus. Again, not exhaustive, but there's some quite large organizations. So the International Criminal Court use ControlPoint for some really cool stuff as well. So our first customer, Catholic Education in Rockhampton. These guys aren't a very big organization, but they needed to clean up their file system and move everything into Content Manager. So the idea was that they would have some governance around their information, cut off the shared drives, cut off the file systems, and have that single source of truth in Content Manager. So for them, the first step was to reduce, so deduplicate everything. And the reduction before and after, well, it doesn't look too much in size. It still made a big impact on being able to find information they needed and then moving that into Content Manager. Next one, Carl, please. Okay, so SEQ Water, a big water body in Queensland. They actually merged a bunch of entities into one, so that created a fair chunk of information sprawl for them. They did a really great job of combining their structured Content Manager data sets into one, so there was a migration piece, moved those together, but what they were left with was file systems and duplicate file systems that ended up making it quite difficult to search. and also in terms of producing information for information searches, RTIs, information requests, became quite difficult. So they purchased a 50 terabyte license, which is quite large, but they did have a lot of unstructured data. And their goal was to understand what they had and reduce the duplication that they had across the drive. So, you know, where they'd copied and combined information, and to start to automate some legal searches. So their results were pretty impressive. Out of 20 terabytes, thereabouts, they had 10 terabytes of rot. So redundant, obsolete, and trivial information that they just no longer needed anymore. So that translated to 6.7 million duplicates, and we worked out just on a storage and information search time return on investment, that returned $2.5 million over 5 years potentially. So as you can see, this is the analysis set for SEQ order, and it's a pretty impressive purple circle. If you can see, 10.4 terabytes of the above 20.56 terabytes is redundant. So they're pure duplicates. And then the obsolete and trivial are available to be assessed as to whether they really need to keep those records anymore. Another SEQ order case, coming back to those information searches and disposal freezes that we're all quite subject to in government. The federal government and the Queensland government recently issued a disposal freeze on records that relate to vulnerable people and how we support vulnerable people and manage information regarding people who are vulnerable. So a lot of this information we saw was stored in the file systems, and the users actually had rights to delete this information. So what we did was identify records within the scope of the disposal freeze. So we trained a category to say, hey, give us the information that meets this criteria, these words, these types of documents, and then let's put a hold. So we create a policy to say, hold, you cannot delete these records. They're in scope of the current disposal freeze. So we're extending that hold capability that Content Manager and other EDRMSs have using ControlPoint into unstructured repositories. So the results were we found those documents and we're able to apply those policies, and then ControlPoint could add the hold to those records until the freeze is listed or they're reviewed to be not valid for that particular freeze. Over the pond, our friends at the Education Review Office, we've had quite a good ControlPoint journey with this team. They initially had a big problem of a big use of network drives, and this is a very common one. And they had limited use or uptake of the eDRMS licensing capacity. So, you know, they were in a bit of a bind in this sense, but they still needed to manage their data. So they had to understand what they had. Again, reduce the duplication, and that's the first thing any of our customers do when they install ControlPoint and start to use that analytics capability. Their other goal was to automate legal searches and then prepare before moving to O365. So clean up their backyard before they move to O365 and the storage up in the cloud. So the results for them, they scanned network drives and the eDRMS. So that was Content Manager for them. They removed a lot of information with a plan to do more when their time permitted. So they got rid of some quick duplicate information. And they also scanned Exchange for information searches as well. So it allows them to search broader than just Content Manager, just the file systems. They're now extending it out into Exchange. They also removed the junk from personal home drives. So we all carry mum's recipes and photos of our babies and pets and all sorts of things. So what they've been able to do is remove the junk, the videos, and then migrate to OneDrive, but move the information into a sort of a siloed off file system with a link back to the home drive for those users. So they're not moving the junk up to the cloud. It's just sitting there and can be managed based on when it was last accessed over time. Wollongong City Council. So this is a council over in Australia, just south of Sydney. These guys had an interesting case where they went to court and couldn't produce information that was vital for a decision that was made around some a park that was put into the public. So the issue for them was not so much around the storage and management of unstructured data, but finding the information. The other problem they had was they used Enterprise Vault, so the archiving system for emails. They had no idea what was in there or what the volume was. So ControlPoint has a connector for Enterprise Vault, so we applied that. The goal was to be able to search all of the repositories that ControlPoint connected to. So that was the Enterprise Vault, the Exchange, the file systems, and eventually plan to retire Enterprise Vault or reduce how much they're managing that, because it was causing quite a load. And you can imagine, you know, in the past, all of the emails that used to go out to people, every single person in the organization received a copy of that email. Enterprise Vault automatically vaulted that, and it became quite unmanageable. So the results were the IT and IM teams are now driving on their individual use cases. So what started out as a litigation case has now got the IT and the information teams really focusing on how they can use ControlPoint for other use cases as well. One of our local universities, quite a large university, this is probably applicable to everyone on the call and anyone who's worked in government or a university before. They had an issue with sensitive documents, just sort of being placed anywhere throughout the file system and not necessarily secured. So in this case, they were looking for board and executive meeting files, and they were sitting, in this case, in a repository that we knew a lot of people had access to, and people could delete them. Similar in the same vein as above, the Senate submission papers, they were secured, but they were still able to be deleted. So the goal for them was to identify the duplicates to start with and remove those, then to relocate these papers into a secured content manager data set. So what that allowed them to do was to secure and manage that information throughout the lifecycle that it's supposed to have, and permissions were applied as they were appropriate. And then from there, they were able to respond to requests for information in a reasonable time frame. So they didn't have to have the users go and search their own file systems with a clunky out-of-the-box search mechanism. They could use ControlPoint to identify it based on the content or based on the title or however they needed to do that. Another university, another common problem that people have, this one was related directly to the GDPR laws that have just come in, the right to be forgotten as an EU citizen. So what we needed to do was understand where passport information was held about the students, and this was part of a broader student information consolidation project. As you could probably understand, university and student information is across a large number of faculties and can be sprawled in a number of different systems. So they needed to consolidate the student information into a managed area, and they used Content Manager student files for that. And what they did was scan and pattern match the passports based on an EU pattern, so an EU passport pattern. This comes out of the box for ControlPoint, and you can also train it and teach it your own patterns as well. So the goal again was to move it based on that passport number into the student file in the matching field in Content Manager. So the results for this were the documents containing those patterns were identified, and just between us, we had 42,000 of them sitting in the file system just in one particular area. And then we could apply a policy to move these student files based on their passport metadata that matched their student number in the system. Another state government use case. This was similar to EU citizens and similar to what Carl was talking about before, that they needed to prepare for the fact that they could be asked to forget somebody. So they needed to prove that a person could be removed from any unstructured and structured data that they might hold. So the first thing they did was find everything matching the person's name and assess that for removal, because you might look for Carl Duncan, but there might be 7 of them. So there had to be some other defining factors around removing Carl Duncan. And then they successfully had to remove that person and prove that they had removed them. So a report of what they removed, which kind of feels counterintuitive, but that was a requirement. So the results were they found all of the documents containing that person's name, and those documents, that list of documents, was submitted for review. And the people who are responsible for understanding the information were able to review that, come back to the people who were managing ControlPoint and said, go for it, these ones can be destroyed, please produce a report to start with. And then ControlPoint was then able to apply a policy to remove those files from all of the different repositories that they sat in. KPMG, another different use case again. KPMG were trying to archive off information into a cheaper storage area. So what they had was a dedicated person would receive a report every day based on the size of the drive that was about to be exceeded. They would then sort of skim off the bottom or the earliest sets of information and move those to a cheaper storage drive. So what they were trying to do was then use ControlPoint to automatically say, based on the last accessed, based on the last created, whatever rules they wanted to teach it, once it's hit that trigger point, move it to that particular archive. So the other thing we said to them was, well, how about we start to reduce the clutter? We were able to remove, I think, Carl, it was about 60 terabytes of pure duplicates and rot. So before they even got to archiving off that data, they realized they could save a fortune just in getting rid of it because they just don't need it anymore.
Yep, no, exactly. That was a conversation with the IT manager because, again, the strategy was to archive. And when we had the, hey, can we actually get rid of stuff? The strategy changed to let's get rid, then archive after that.
That's right. So they were able to do both. But first of all, they were also able to reduce the size of the storage system that they were using as a starter. And the CPP Investment Board, so again, a GDPR regulation coming into effect. They just had to be GDPR compliant and find all PII, find where they needed to get rid of someone if someone requested to be forgotten. So they're currently undertaking a pilot to be used for the enterprise deployment. We find that a lot of our customers do go through a proof of concept or a pilot with ControlPoint just to prove the use cases to their board. And they're usually quite successful.
Perfect. So I suppose any questions? I know Denise, you've had a question there on the chat thread. Anyone else? So I might just, I suppose, Denise, so your question for everyone who hasn't seen it. So the Gartner and Forrester information was 2018. Where does ControlPoint sit in the more recent reviews? Good question. There is some information. I don't have a Gartner or a Forrester account myself, but I will follow up and get that. I can see from some freebie type information that it's still sitting in that high quadrant. I can also see that there was a custom review done in 2020 and it scored 4 out of 5 for customers. And again, there were lots of different technologies, Verona's, other things that were used. And again, they all do slightly different things, but have definitely seen that. But I'll get the official report for 2020 and look back shortly after this.
Yeah, I'm not sure there is one out yet, Carl. I have been watching and looking at those peer reviews, and we are between the 4 and 4.5 out of 5 at this rate.
Denise or anybody else across the board, does anyone else have any other questions? Or want to, again, I suppose, talk about any sort of use cases that might be applicable for them? Simon, yourself? No? That's okay. If not, again, if you have other questions after today, obviously, again, we're around. We do have other questions in relation to that. Again, you've got our details. Subscription pricing. Good question. For anyone who has obviously had pricing before from ControlPoint, either directly from Micro Focus, other partners in NZ, or ourselves. There's 2 models, similar to Content Manager. For those that have gone through that journey, there's a perpetual where you own it, and then there's a now new subscription model. The subscription pricing for ControlPoint came out a month ago. I had some conversations with David Gould because it's incredibly cheaper for a lower barrier to entry. As an example, for say a 5 terabyte installation, the old subscription model would have been around 30 odd K for the license, and that gives you own that license. Moving forward in the subscription world, it's the same product, the same thing. There's no differences in relation to similar. It's completely different to Content Manager. It's exactly the same product. You're looking for around about $8,000. So for $8,000, you can get a 5 terabyte license. And we recently quoted in Queensland, the largest government entity, and they had a quote that was about $180,000. It was quite large of a quote. So they were looking at a lot of data, and we could do the subscription model for, I think it was 4.10 months of the year instead of a 1 year price. So what they were paying for 1 year, we could do the same price over 4, nearly 5 years, effectively for the same product. So it was a lot cheaper for them and an option for that. Anyone else using it in NZ other than the RO? No, well, possibly. In our clientele, no. There are a lot of other clienteles using it for IDLE. So IDLE is the underlying technology for ControlPoint, and it stands for Information Data Operating Layer. And there's definitely a lot of clients in New Zealand that use the full-blown IDLE. This is I suppose, the baby brother or the baby sister. Again, IDLE has that ability to do things like video analytics, audio, speech to text, those types of things, and ControlPoint can bolt all those things on as well. So there's definitely, I think, New Zealand Transport are using that. There's a couple other IDLE clients, but that doesn't have a ControlPoint sort of interface and feel. The next version definitely will, but again, it's the bigger brother product and is a costing model is slightly different as well. So it's based on how many documents and things that you've indexed versus data. So that pricing as well, just to clarify, is if you buy a 50 terabyte license, you can scan up to 50 terabytes, and as long as you're within that, if you dispose of 10 terabytes, you've still got 10 terabytes left at the other end. So you can go up and down in that space. It's not per document, it's literally whatever you've got under scan at that point in time. You can move up and down the spectrum as you wanted to. We also have a bit of a spring offer. So if you're on our email database, you probably would have already seen this go out to, I think it was on Monday. It's a bit of a spring clean for spring. Funny that. But this is again around a ControlPoint license, some time with Sarah and the team, a bit of a mini analysis. So, getting a bit of a report together for I suppose, the upper echelons to say, a bit of hey, this is what we need to do and this is what it's going to cost. And this is the savings that we will make. Some ControlPoint templates. So as we've done this time and time again, we've effectively templated everything to the point where if you ask for something, we've probably already done it or got it. So the example for Brian at ERO, again, moving data between systems. Again, we had something there to give him, go, here's a template you can follow. So he could go and do those types of things. And we also have effectively an online training portal. So the online training portal isn't just for ControlPoint, it's for Content Manager and things like that as well. But it is a one-stop shop for videos, cheat sheets, manuals for training material. It started with CM, but obviously as CP started to come as a bit of a player, and also the new Sharepoint to Content Manager integration out of the box is the team behind the scenes, so Kat and Sarah and Debbie, have been creating all that content, and that's a subscription model where you can get access to all of that content, but again, specifically for ControlPoint for this offer. Denise, so you mentioned that it works with Enterprise Vault. Does it work with any other archive systems? Mimecast, I'd have to check the additional connectors and come back. To my knowledge, I don't believe it does, but again, there's a new connector model as well that allows, effectively it's called NiFi. It allows us to actually write connectors for those systems, and IDLE, if I go back to the slide, IDLE is the one that has all those connectors, which is where they were created, and they all came and got created by customers asking for different connectors. So I can have a check with the IDLE team and also the CP team, the development team, to see if there is one for Mimecast in relation to that. Also, one of the things to work through with archiving and Vault is we often find that they might be archived or vaulted for a period. So one client here is once your data is older than a week, it gets vaulted, and then you've got to unvault everything every single time. We also see when clients move to the cloud, they end up rehydrating everything if they go to Office 365. So therefore, they go through a rehydration phase and then go into that ability to do that after the fact. Any other questions from anyone else?
Hey, Carl.
Yep.
If there is vaulted emails within Content Manager, does CP recognize them? Because I know where I previously worked, there was a number of vaulted emails that were put into Content Manager, but they were not able to be read except for the recipient. And
put them in.
Yeah,
a bit of a common Content Manager, I suppose, scenario, especially with, again, vaulting systems. And there was a change of format back in the day from the old BBX format files as well back to where they are today. So if effectively, if you could identify those emails, and again, I know the VBX ones have a certain different extension, and I know obviously there are conversion options within Content Manager itself to do that, but you could definitely understand how much you've got vaulted. If it was a regular extension and is just vaulted, as long as there was a status or something in the email that said, hey, I'm vaulted, you'd definitely be able to look at creating a custom field or looking at those types of things. I would definitely want to have a bit of a play to work that out.
And with ControlPoint, if you've scanned a directory and you've got it sitting in 2 different repositories, is there any type of conflict? Like if you're looking at the network drive under contracts and that contract folder is actually sitting in the procurement file share, and you want to remove, does it actually remove it from the other repository when you
do the removal?
Yeah.
Yep. So when you do the removal, it's currently a manual choice. So if I look back at, say, I'll find something better, fisheries report. So this is sitting in 2 different spots. The red one indicates that it's the master of the 2. So that could be in Content Manager in our example, because we have that as a master. Or it's the most recent document out of the 2. So again, you choose as a user, and again, this is where we start to work with business areas. We've seen a few ControlPoint projects fail where this is implemented and IT people try to play God because they know the information better than the user. It's 10 times out of 10, it's not the case. So you can choose which one is kept or not kept. So depending on how your repositories and that structure is set up, I might be moving the one from corporate services and someone else from the contract section. But we have, there is also an enhancement request, and our team are looking to create something a little bit quicker. That if it is something and it's a master or a file that's sitting in Content Manager, then let's go get rid of the file and put a TR5 there, because yes, I can go and get rid of all of this 1200 examples, and again, just an example, but it would be better to actually replace all of these with a TR5 rather than, well, again, still good to delete the original document, but replace them with a TR5 to the one that's in Content Manager. So we often find, depending on the organization, Sarah mentioned Catholic education, they kind of cut the cord. They didn't leave shortcuts. They just said, well, we're getting rid of shared drives and we're moving into Content Manager, so deal with it. Others are a bit, oh, hang on, we'll just leave a shortcut to a web link and that's okay. And again, the culture of the organization tends to dictate that method and that path effectively.
Right. And so once you've removed duplicates, do you have to rescan the repository?
You certainly can. So we talked about there's different scanning options. Again, you can actually set these up to scan regularly. It's really up to, I suppose, to an organization of how often you want to scan. So obviously the first scan is the big crawl, the big index, and then after that you can have incremental indexing. So that just gets what's different effectively. So the raft of things when you set up a repository, we can look at the different paths. Could be one network path or many. It's really up to, again, how you sort of slice and dice your drive. Again, those options for looking at the content, looking in zip files, those patterns, and then that ability to actually say, well, I'm going to schedule this to run every hour or every week or every month. Obviously, you want to have accurate data when you're working with ControlPoint, especially if users are adding or deleting documents as it goes.
Exactly, and if you're using Content Manager as your source of truth as well, we recommend that you regularly rescan that, so you have it set up to scan at least every week. Yep. Just because it is the master, and then it can go and find duplicates that may have been moved into Content Manager that also sit somewhere else.
Yeah. And we often find in projects, if I'm a user in corporate services and finance, and I don't know why I keep picking on them, but if I keep going through and I'm tagging stuff and saying remove, and then I keep looking about, I've still got all these here, why haven't they been removed? Sarah might have processed that as part of the project, but we haven't rescanned it or reanalyzed it. Therefore, it's still sitting in this repository. So the document could be gone, but it still looks like as they clean up, they want to see, benefits. And one client we actually did the end work for, and we were rescanning every day. So, we would check every day and go, yep, they've all been done, boom, tag and move and delete, depending on what I wanted to do, and then and rescan it that night. So you can really do it as much or as little as you want, either manually or on a schedule. And
you mentioned you could generate reports.
Yep. Certainly do. So everything you do within Content Manager, the whole admin section, which we tend not to go through in a demo because it's a little bit more fun, but there's a whole raft of audit reports. So, you know, that ability to see that Sarah has applied a tag to a document, or I've applied a policy, or, you know, those types of things. Again, it's that ability to go and see all those things and see where it's at. Again, plus those abilities to create custom grammars, patterns, target locations, templates, see what your usage is. Security, one thing that we didn't mention obviously as part of this is every single, if I go back to the homepage, every single object here has security. So again, that's a big thing when you're looking at scanning with ControlPoint. Every repository has security. So I could actually say, if I go back to my repository view, you know, when I log in as the finance person from corporate services, I'll only see my repository, but when Sarah, the admin, logs in, she'll see everything. So again, security can be applied for these, also categories and also policies. So there's a raft of them to be sitting there.
So in order to delete, you need to, in order to delete, you actually need to have that delete user on the network drives.
Correct. So traditionally, when we go through and set this up, ControlPoint, we end up getting effectively a service account, and we've got some permissions and guidance and templates for that. But that account effectively has, I don't want to say godlike access, but is high level access on your network drive and or other repositories. That could be one account, could be multiple per repository. But it definitely needs the ability to read and read write, that ability to delete if you want to do that. I've had a couple of organizations have just done read for the start, and then when they go and delete a document, it can't because it doesn't have delete. So again, you've just got to update that, and depending on your network drive and permission structure and hierarchy is a bit of a fun challenge as well.
I can well imagine.
This is just that quick example I talked about before about credit cards. So again, different credit card patterns for different examples, just to show that, you know, when going through and setting this up, I can go and look at all those different patterns or toggle ones off that I don't want and go through and save it. Simon, so you had, can you index and manage files on employees' laptops? Great question. I like that. Obviously, ERO did the home drives, which was obviously in relation to you know, a network drive like we all have. In relation to an employee's laptop, I would thinking that it's a corporate laptop, not a BYOD. That'd be a bit of a cultural challenge. Even though the home drives are often cultural challenges because you know, it's my personal information, nothing to do with the entity. I have a personal view on that I have a work life and I have a home life, and for me, two different devices, not one. But we often blend, and we often see people blend those devices and access. But if that computer has access to the network drive, if that computer has access to the network and it's a mappable UNC path, then yeah, in theory, you could scan that drive if you wanted to. Or if your desktops are mapped to your user profiles, or like as in my example, I map mine to OneDrive for Business, you've got those abilities to scan that data as well. Denise, you said, where's the index live? Great question. So as part of the installation, ControlPoint has a SQL database. So it doesn't, it takes a copy of all of the information. So again, it will actually build up that all these files are sitting within a repository. And then it will know that these files exist. And again, it will have it splits out the content and the metadata. So the metadata goes into an SQL database and the content goes into content engines, very similar to Content Manager and how it splits it off, to be honest. And then again, that data is sitting there and that's what it's using. So it's not going back to the source every single time that it wants to go and do a search. So again, go back to going looking for Carl. It's doing a live search on its database, obviously, which has been scanned from somewhere, be it a network drive or be it a Sharepoint or those types of repositories. Any other questions? And again, there might be questions after this. We often find after doing one of these, there'll be oh, hang on, but what about this? Can we do one of these? Again, we do have having a look, there's a raft of, if you go to our YouTube channel, and again, we'll follow up with a couple of links after this, but we have a whole YouTube channel where we give away and I suppose provide free educational content. We have obviously a lot of stuff that we have on our training portal that's different. But if you wanted to know about ControlPoint, there's 13 videos from, you know, snippet from 2 to 5 minute videos just on how to do auto classification and that use case. If you just want to understand how to dispose and delete stuff, you know, those options as well. You've also got things like Microsoft Sharepoint integration with Content Manager. So if you're an entity that's looking at that, again, 11 different videos there that we keep adding to and more coming over this weekend. So there's a raft of things like that. We will provide the recording, Denise, after this, so we'll probably upload it into our playlist for ControlPoint, but we'll definitely send through a link. Let's do a bit of post-production on it, and probably send that out for you early next week, probably Monday. But again, if you do have any other questions after this, again, you have our details, obviously, from the original invite, obviously on LinkedIn, anywhere you can get a hold of us, you can. But really want to say thanks very much for your time. I appreciate taking an hour and a half out of your busy afternoons just to work through this. And again, any other questions, then please reach out. Otherwise, thanks for everyone for attending.